to work on overcoming it. A very good afternoon to everyone present here for one-day virtual panel discussion on global financial crisis, causes, effects, and its implication on Indian economy. A few general instructions before we begin. Requesting all participants to mute their audio and turn off their videos during the session. All participants have to be present throughout the panel discussion to get the benefit of the virtual e-learning program and for the e-certificate. Also, please note you're requested to fill the feedback form at the end of the session. I, Dr. Anjali Motwani, Assistant Professor, School of Commerce, on behalf of Faculty Research Cell, Samshodhana, Jain deemed to be University, Bangalore, deem it my honor to welcome our patrons, Dr. Raj Singh, Vice Chancellor, Jain deemed to be University, Dr. Ishwaran Iyer, Pro Vice Chancellor, Jain deemed to be University, Dr. Dinesh Neelkant, Director, School of Commerce, Jain deemed to be University. I also extend a very hearty welcome to Dr. P. Baba Naina Kumar, Director for Consultancy and Corporate Training, Christu Jayanti College, Bangalore, Mr. Dhananjay Sinha, Managing Director and Chief Strategist, JM Financial Institutional Securities Limited, Mumbai, Mrs. Shobha Satish, Co-founder and Director, Next Step Logistics Management Private Limited, Bangalore, Mr. Ketan, Faculty, Koshas Group of Institutions, Karnataka. Jain deemed to be University is an intellectual destination that draws inspired students from more than 38 countries to India's Silicon Valley, Bangalore. Jain deemed to be University has been established with an aim to provide quality education and overall development of students because of its commitment to learning, research, academics, entrepreneurship development. NAC, National Assessment and Accreditation Council, have awarded A++ grade to our Jain deemed to be University. Under the leadership and guidance of our director, Dr. Dinesh Neelkant, in the most recent India Today ranking, School of Commerce, Jain deemed to be University, has secured 43rd position and the 6th rank in the top 10 emerging colleges of India. Also, 8th rank among the top 10 colleges with best placement record. We are proud to announce that Jain deemed to be University has hosted the Khelo India University Games and emerged as the overall champion. This indeed is a moment of pride for all of us. School of Commerce, empowerment of students, enhancement of values, and enrichment of academics and research has been the hallmark of School of Commerce, Jain deemed to be University, for nearly 3 decades. The constant innovations nurtured in its various spheres of functioning, which include global tie-ups such as ACCA, CIMA, CMA, CIPS, etc., and experiential learning practices like student immersion programs, entrepreneurs on training and business simulation, amongst others, have characterized the growth of School of Commerce over the years. School of Commerce has a dynamic set of experienced and research-oriented faculty members who draw students from various countries towards a keen learning environment. This panel discussion is planned and executed by Faculty Research Cell, Samshodhana. Faculty Research Cell, Samshodhana is an initiative of School of Commerce, Jain deemed to be University, and is aimed at enhancing research capacity of faculty and students to guide researchers in disseminating, publishing, and applying the research outputs. The Faculty Research Cell is instrumental in organizing webinars, FDPs, MDPs, workshops, national and international conferences, not only during the pandemic, but over several years. Participants, please note, this panel discussion is among 4 panelists on global financial crisis, causes, effects, and its implication on Indian economy. Now, I request Dr. Vanilla R., Associate Professor, School of Commerce, Jain deemed to be University, to introduce our moderator. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Anjali ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Our moderator for today's panel discussion is Dr. P. Baba Nyanakumar. He is the first director for consultancy and corporate training at Chris Jayanti College, Bangalore. He has completed his schooling in Marcos's High Secondary School, Nasri. He is gold medalist in commerce. He received the gold medal from the former president, His Excellency K.R. Narayanan, 1992. He has received awards for the best research paper from IIM Bangalore and from IIM Calcutta. He was awarded with the research paper for the project on ICT enabled supply chain management, IIT Delhi. He is an executive member in IIM Hyderabad. He possesses AIMS International Award, Venus International Award, Academic Excellence Award, IBAE 2019 Dubai. He published more than 80 research articles. His publications attracted more than 1,000 citations in Google site. He has presented 150 plus papers in various conferences. He is trained by IIM Bangalore on leadership traits. He is a former principal of a private college in Coimbatore. He is an executive member in Association of Indian College Principals, and he is a member in AIMS, AIB, AICP, former Senate member in Bharatiya University, Coimbatore. He is an academic council member and board of studies member in autonomous colleges. He has delivered 120 speeches as a resource person. I'm very happy to welcome Dr. P. Baba Nyanakumar sir to start the panel discussion. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. Thank you, Dr. Rajali and Dr. Vanilla, for nice introduction and from the Jain University. First, I thank the Jain University and the organizing people to have a nice discussion about this global financial crisis. First, I welcome our panel members. I think we'll have an introduction about our panel members. I request our panel members to introduce themselves. First, I request Mr. Dhananjay Sinha, who is with the JM Financials, Mumbai. He is a very good economist and he is the chief economist also. Sir, over to you. Can introduce yourself with your USP.
So the thing is, thank you very much for the opportunity. So, sort of good afternoon, everybody. So, essentially, I have had a career in doing research, economic research, macroeconomic research, and also in the financial market. So, it kind of marries both of them. And I have had opportunity to work on various sectors, goods, investment cycle, consumption sector. So it's a very varied kind of research experience that I bring in. So it marries macroeconomics with sectoral research and markets, which includes equity, fixed income, commodities, and of course, there is a significant global overlay of whatever I do. So I think that is the functional thing I've had.
Yes. Okay, sir. Thank you, Sinha sir. Now, Madam Shobha Sadesh is also the co-founder and the director of Next Step Logistics Management Private Limited in Bangalore. Madam, over to you. You can introduce yourself with your USP. Madam, you can unmute. Madam, we are unable to hear.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to be as a panelist here. Thanks for Jain University and Dr. Vanilla ma'am. Actually, I'm worked with the topmost shipping companies. I started my career in 2000, and it was with the P&O Netline and Maersk Line and topmost shipping line in the world. And also, I worked with the freight forwarding companies and the customs house agent. All my experience is about 20 plus years. Then last 4.5 years with one of my friend, I started this business, Next Step Institute, where the skill development to the young blood for the logistics and aviation sector, which is a very booming sector and where the demand is high for the young people to come into this industry. So we are bridging the gap for the students to join to the professional course, professional life after the academics. So about myself, this is actually, I'm basically a law graduate and I'm pursuing my PhD in logistics, the legal regime in logistics with Alliance University. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am, for a nice introduction. So she's also an advocate.
Yes.
Thank you. Next, I think Dr. Ketan is also the faculty from Coaches Group of Institution. He will join with our discussion shortly. So let us directly move on to the discussion. We'll start with the nice introduction of the topic, how the J University created topic, I don't know. But recently, just 2 days back, we came to know everything, even in Indian situation. One of the research done in the International Monetary Fund just a week back, they mentioned here indifferent news for the different people. They predicted that there will be a downward trend in the global economic outlook. And they mentioned that the downward trend already began, not going to begin. They mentioned that it has already begun. So there was a doubt whether we are going to face the real economic recession once again. We already faced the problem in 2008 and 9. Of course, India was not affected too much in that global recession, but now the International Monetary Fund has given a red signal, and they mentioned that it already started. And it quoted that global growth rate of the GDP, that is gross domestic product, it was 5.9% in 2021. But in 2022, they mentioned that it has been downgraded to 4.4%. See that one. Immediately there's a decrease. Usually the GDP tends to increase in globally, but you can see here the trend is entirely different. It tends to decrease. Maybe there are a number of reasons. First reason, they used to quote that sharp increase in inflation since this February 2022, especially in American and European countries. That was said to be the reason. But why the inflation happened suddenly in European and American countries? Because everybody knows that is the Ukraine-Russian war. Then we are seeing our neighboring countries' problem. One side in Sri Lanka, they are facing a big economic crisis, and even there are a number of agitations are going on. In another side, you can see in Pakistan, that also they are facing political crisis plus the political problem. That is the neighboring countries issue. In globally, another thing, that is the US-China trade war has begun. Internally, we can't estimate what will be the output. Then recently, the China's zero COVID policy, they introduced that concept, but everybody is worrying about that one. The inputs, that is the supplies from China, has been drastically affected because the zero COVID policy introduced by the Chinese government. In another side, the North Korean political issues, that is the another big issues. The entire Korea, as well as some of the Asian countries, has been affected. Of course, not in a big manner, very light manner. Another side, from the supply side, the shortage of coal in the entire globe begins because there was some supply chain issues. Most of the supply chain has been taken over the big brothers in globe. So we are going to face the problem of shortage of coal. Even in case of India, we are able to see the shortage of coal. Then another one, the political changes, especially in European countries, as well as in some of the South Asian countries. These are all the things which leads to high inflation in fuel and the food prices, and it creates some vulnerability in different places, especially in case of low-income countries. And that may be the reason why the Sri Lanka has been affected. That is why the IMF mentioned that even beyond 2023, the global growth is forecasted to decline rather than increase. It may decrease to 3.3%. And inflation, if you see it has been projected to be 5.7% in advanced economies, including US and some of the countries. But coming to the developing countries, the IMF projected it is only be 8.7%. That is a huge inflation we are expecting. And the countries are struggling between what is the economic fragmentation and how we can go for economic segmentation as well as the integration. See that one, that is the big issue, what it has been quoted by the economist, whether we are going to face the problem of segmentation or fragmentation or integration. That is the reason why the global growth rate is expected to slow down to 3.8% by 2023. One of the poll conducted in both US as well as other countries, that is from CNBC, they mentioned that 81%, that is especially the economists believe that there may be a small recession at the end of 2022 if the Ukraine war has not ended. So these are the problems we are facing. Even from the Asian side, we are facing that there will be a little slowdown, because last year the growth has been 5.2%. Now it is mentioned that it is going to be slowed down to 5.1. So these are all the global issues, but how far it is pressurizing the India, this continent. The India has to deal with the very big inflation, especially in case of fuel, food prices. That is the risk. And IMF also decreased the growth rate of India to 8.2% from 9%. So that is the volatility how the global we are facing. I think now Professor Ketan joined now. Professor Ketan, are you there? Yes, let us move on to the story. So we are living in the world where our GDP rate is affected highly. Let us move on to the views of Professor Dhananjan Sinha. Dear sir, you are a chief economist. You can throw some lights about the growth rate, GDP especially, why there is a big difference in GDP of different countries, and what will be the position of India. Over to Sinha sir. Yes, sir. Now you can speak.
You're talking to me?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
So
now it is your turn. Yes.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So there was some connection problem. So did you pose any question or?
Yes, sir. For you, what about your views regarding the?
So okay. So essentially, the way I summarize these things. So essentially, we are getting into a scenario where there is sort of a stagflationary scenario that has been evolving post the COVID sort of recovery. So if you look at 2020-21, there has been a synchronous rise in commodity prices. Many prices have risen by almost like 100% or more than that. And essentially what has happened is that post-COVID, there was a major sort of lockdown and slowdown, various supply chain issues, supply chains were actually cut. And what has happened is that most of the countries have actually expanded their fiscal support to the various to the household to support to protect the households and the economy. So there has been a disproportionate rise in fiscal expenditure in developed countries. For instance, there has been almost like a 30% jump in the fiscal support as 30% of GDP has been given, including off-balance sheet and on-balance sheet items. So what has happened is that you have a significant transfer of money that has happened to the household, whereas the COVID lockdown and the supply chain disruption that has happened has actually blocked the supply, especially from a trade standpoint. And as a result of that, everything has actually flared up. Now, what we are seeing now is that all this is translating into a hyperinflation scenario, and this two additional thing that has happened this year is that you have the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which is also a source of sort of supply shortages, especially in agriculture produce, including wheat, maize, sunflower, etc., that you see a spiraling up of commodities once again. And Russia also sort of supplies steel and other metals to rest of the country. Russia supplies steel, and the total production in the world is about 1,800 million tons. So there is certain amount of supply shortages that is happening even on the material side, kind of lockdown and all that is also sort of exacerbating the supply chain. So I think this is continuing, and you have a significant demand source that has happened, especially in the developed markets, thanks to the fiscal expansion, and also the fact that you had a very large monetary expansion, especially for developed markets such as US, which expanded its balance sheet by roughly about $4 or $5 trillion. So the balance sheet has grown to almost like $9 trillion that had translated into a lot of liquidity, etc. That is also sort of exacerbating the inflationary scenario. So we are in a scenario now where the real economy, if you look at the entire world, it is not really sort of showing that kind of support. You have a sort of a stagflationary thing, and there the central banks and all, especially in developed markets, are seeing inflation going out of hand. It is getting entrenched and it is getting unhinged. For instance, US is showing or experiencing an inflation of 8.5%. The core inflation is about 6%, which is highest in 40 years. We have not seen something like this since 1972. Likewise, in Europe also, you have 7.5%, 8% kind of inflation. And the Bank of England yesterday or day before has forecasted that the inflation can go up to 10% as well. In India, I would say that the WPI inflation has been fairly high in the region of 14 to 15%, thanks to the spillover effect of the rise in global commodity prices. But that has been sort of partial. So I think given the context that you have a synchronous rise in commodity prices, you have a certain pass which is still partial. And that is translating into a built-up of cost pressure for the manufacturing sector and the Indian companies, where you see that CPI inflation is in the region of 7%, and RBI understands that in April it could go to 8% as well, and they had to raise rates this week. So clearly the spillover effect and the pipeline inflation that is there from an India standpoint, it is still there, and RBI has been somewhat, I would say, complacent in identifying this in the last policy or the policy in the beginning of the year. And hence they are sort of understanding that they have to really scale it up in terms of the inflation projection. So what you are seeing across the world is a sort of intense and synchronized rise in inflation across developed and developing markets, and all the central banks are now busy fighting that, which means they will have to increase rate, they will have to withdraw stimulus, and some countries they have to withdraw years of as well. So whatever developed countries are giving may actually sort of be withdrawn. So
yes, I think some internet issues. Okay, the things are clearly mentioned that two important points. One is about the inflation, and it is moving towards the hyperinflation. Second important point, the spillover effects. How far the spillover effects have been created by different commodity prices, especially because of this Ukraine war, as well as the global supply chain. Let us move on to the next area of the discussion. We can see in case of Indian markets, if from China we used to import more goods, but now it is with policy. And usually India imported goods worth rupees, I think $97.5 billion.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Now you are audible, sir.
So
yes, sir.
I'm so sorry.
No
it's
issue.
Going off. So what I'm is that what we are looking at as an outcome is that central banks will have to withdraw their stimulus and also from a fiscal stimulus standpoint, there will be a certain withdrawal. So there will be increase in taxes, etc. Your commodity prices, inflation rising, that itself brings down the demand side. So you are actually looking at a significant slowdown as we move forward in the coming quarters. And there are fears that in developed markets, especially US and now Europe, because of the Russia-Ukraine thing, they are facing significant supply shortage in gas and fuel prices, and those things are actually sort of impacting them. So there is a very high probability or reasonably high probability of a recession out there. And from an India standpoint, I would say that India again, from the bottom, if you look at the COVID recovery, we went down something like 6.5%, and we rebounded to something like 8.9% or something this year, and it is projected to be about 7.2% by RBI. I think what is important is the second half and the last 3 quarters of this year could be closer to 4%. So you are looking at a slowdown there. I think the risk is more on the downside. You can have a persistently high inflation, and you have a currency which can actually depreciate, and rates can actually rise. So interest rates will rise, your currency can actually depreciate. So I think it's a kind of a messy adjustment on the policy front. It will impact corporate performance. It will impact earnings growth of companies. It will impact the stock markets as well. So what will happen is that you have the risk-free rate, which is the government bond yield, which has gone up to almost like 7.5%. It has come up from 5.8%, and globally also rates are rising. And earnings, which is the profit growth of companies, or expected growth for next couple of years, will also be scaled down. And I think the bigger issue here is that post the COVID, there will be a very large public debt to GDP across most countries. I looked at G20, G7 countries. There is roughly about 10 to 15% delta in terms of a rise in the public debt to GDP ratio, which means as things normalize, while you currently have a geopolitical stress that is there, there is a supply chain issue that are there. But I think if the growth gets into a slower pace, it's quite likely that the major countries, especially the developed markets who are burdened with larger debt, they will adopt more protectionist policies in terms of trade. And that's not very positive for emerging markets such as China, India, who have grown over the last 30 years, based on their access to markets in developed economies. So I think it is a tricky scenario. There is a long-term and a short-term impact that will pan out going forward, and financial markets, currency rates, exchange rate, all of them will adjust to that. I mean, that's a short brief of what I think at this juncture.
Yes.
Happy to answer any question if you have.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. We'll come back once again. So nicely you point out the spillover effects. Then how far the new rates is going to happen, that is risk-free rate. These are all the reasons mainly, and hyperinflation, you are moving towards that one. Thank you, sir. Once again, we'll come to the second round. Let us move on to the next part. Yes, sir. Coming to the Chinese issue with India, India is usually importing around $97.5 billion from China, and it is going to be 46.1% from 2020. But what is happening in the global supply chain? If you see, if you want to export or send goods from Mangalore to Rotterdam, now it costs around $6,000. It was more than 10 times previously. And even if you want to send goods to Dubai, it comes around $3,000. Previously, it was around only $300 to $500. See that one, the container cost is increasing. and especially the congestion in different ports in US, Europe, and Asia. Because of the more congestion in the ports, they are facing another problem, especially the coal deficit and the sailing schedules, the equipment storage. All this creates the another big issue. And now the average cost of shipping the large container, that is around 40 equivalent containers, is increasing even 5 times. And how far this is going to affect? We are having a good panel member from the supply chain issue and from the logistic department. Madam Shobha Sadish, she is also the co-founder and director of Next Step Logistics. Madam, what is your opinion regarding these problems in global supply chain? How far it is going to affect India? Over to you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, and I think sir has taken you in, given the just glimpse of that, how the containers shortage and how the hike has happened in this logistics supply chain industry. So it is like we are aware from 2020 what the pandemic came in, and again next again for the logistics industry, Suez Canal blockage has happened, and again the Russia and Ukraine war. These three has made a lot of difficulties and to move smoothly the raw materials from one place to the other place, that is to one country to other country. And many companies are trying to come out of this very slowly, and this mainly the affected is like logistics distress. It has happened. The main key points affected is production delays happened, and relying on the third party has become a very difficult reliance on the third parties, because, and also the next is double down of the technology due to the pandemic, how we survived in this particular time, how the industry like logistics, shipping companies, airlines, or whatever manufacturing, how they have survived, and commodity pricing, what went high. As already Mr. Dhananjaya sir has telling that there was a price, lot of commodity prices increased drastically, and workforce. So these are the few points. I'll just give the brief about that. So coming to the logistics, as I told, there was a pandemic suddenly when 2020 China was first lockdown, then come to the Europe and the US. Suddenly from all the sides we are covered and we are blocked totally. And when the containers has come to India, suddenly when it was a lockdown started in India, people were worried like to clear the cargo or to invest or not to invest to clear the consignments to take to their factory. And even though they have given shipping lines as announced, and the government has also with their hands with the shipping lines, they have given the free time where there itself started blocking the containers. So the containers started shortage to export again. It was already not clear. Containers were there. And initially in the 1 or 2 months, the planning how to do the job, how to take out this workflow was only the confusion with many of the logistics people. So then slowly they were trying to come out of that. By the time the containers, port congestions happened, and already there is a containers availability was become totally blocked in that. And as congested ports has happened, means because of the vessels which is coming were not able to take a berth to offload the containers because of again it is linked one to one, it is linked, it has happened. And finally there is actually change the flow of goods. As we told, we were the lot of imports used to come for India from China, and even not only from for India, many sectors still today. Again, take up the example of today, till the again they have gone for the lockdown till this month end as per the news. So it is very difficult the raw materials to reach. So this is what the containers got a lot of block in that. And you know that one more, the major point is that China is only the container manufacturing units. We had a lot of, we depend on them. So that is also to get the new containers, to manufacture the new containers also slow down. Again, because of the lockdown, because of all this circle, it has been all slow down, and the ocean freight rates has doubled, not doubled, 300 times, 300 to 350 times. In my 20 years of experience, I never paid that much rate for China imports or the exports. This, the one where the $3,000, where hardly it was the $450, we exported for $100 also the ocean freight part I'm talking. So it was boomed like anything. And of course, the shipping lines also was the vessels, they were layoff, means the one vessel will sail and next vessel, because the business to rotate that they have stopped. So the getting the space for the US and all, we used to transfer it in 35 to 40 days, worst come worst. Today, the scenario is that there, because we are not able to get the space in the vessels, it is taking 90 days. 90 days after the clearance because of the space problem. There is a full container load and off container load. Full container, at least it reaches in 60 days. Off container, whatever the LCL cargo, we tell it as a loose cargo materials, they combine, consolidate and send it for that. And the same way it has affected in the aviation industry also, because passenger division, we all know the flights got fully off on that time. And the cargo, yes, the cargo was perishables, which is very demanded, medicines and all, which is required, necessary required things, was hiked up the air freight rates also. So this is drastically the manufacturers or everyone, the buyers was in little bit shock for this to come out. By the time what happened, again, the Suez Canal, 166 days, 106 days, it got a block of evergreen vessel, ever given the vessel name was that it was in the Suez Canal. When it's going, it got stuck. Then again, the 3 months, almost the 3 months, the blockage, that also has created the space where we cannot get the space, container blockage. And this also made the lot of problems in that. Meanwhile, again, there was a one ship which was traveled from Gujarat to the Colombo. There was a dangerous goods where it hit for the one of the stone in the Colombo. There it was a blast. The whole Colombo was which is the hub for all the sector for the movement. It got like all the dangerous goods, chemicals was spread out, and it was not able to sail for few days. So which has immediately called for cleaning and all that also has blocked this. So simultaneously, it's got all the causes, crisis, it has effect, it has made into the go high, the prices, which is affected very badly. But then next, it is recent, the war of Ukraine and Russia, where the routings has to stop. A lot of exports, as Mr. Dhananjay sir has told, that oil, especially oil, fuel and all, how the hike has happened now. Because yes, of course, there is a demand, where the demand is there, we have to meet that one, but we are not able to get it in time. This is one thing. And of course, the production delays are happening due to all these delays. Next, it is connected to that, delays are happening. So again, the relying on the third party, what happened, many small freight forwarders or some small companies were not able to sustain to give the service because of a lot of money where they were not able to overcome on this pandemic time. So they, whoever has closed, only we have to depend on whichever the third party, because whom I was using, that particular person was not able to sustain and he has closed his company, then I have to rely on them. And they have to, of course, they have to have a lot of pressure to move the cargoes, all those things as one more effect. And again, the technology in this, we were not able to move by sitting on the technology. We depended totally on a digital. Everything, the movement of inventory, managing, seeing in the system, and we used to, of course, it was digitalization was there in already in logistics, but still in this time, sitting without going for the office, managing everything in the online, everything, or releasing the documents or releasing the containers, clearance, everything online went. So the investment for the companies was a burden for them to invest the money on the technology, where again the money has taken time for them to digest these financial crisis on this time. And of course, because of all this, of course, the price, commodity price will go high. When the cost of moving is 300 to 350% as hike in the freight, the total, the cost has to be paid by the buyer, of course. The end user will have to pay the very high cost for each commodity it has gone. So, for example, the cooking oil, what we used to use for, I think, 120 rupees or something, now it has gone to 190, 200 rupees. So, we are all, but it is necessary, we have to use it. This all effect has happened. And of course, the workers, as we all know, either blue collar or white collar people, they all shifted to their native places where we are not able to get the work smoothly. We had a lot of problem in the logistics industry where we need in the port terminals, the workers, skeleton staff started working, where there is only few people start day and night working. So that also caused to the lot of effects to this industry. So the overall, these things cause a lot of inflation and the pressure on the industry, and also the for the movement of the cargoes. All these things has made a lot of effects. Coming to this, the next is as India's trade, commodity trade, as I told, we depend a lot of on China. The overall, as Mr. Baba has told already, that 90% of our commodities, yes, we used to take a furniture, tiles, anything you name it, we used to get it from China. Anything you name, we used to import from China. Compared to our export to China, import was very high. This affected a lot in our country, not only for India, all over the world. So even US was got affected because China used to send a lot of goods to US, and many manufacturing, even the car manufacturing people, till today they are getting a blockage because the clearance is not happening. Their machines are not able to export from China because they majorly dependent on that country. So this pandemic has made it very big, lot of difference to the country for all over the country and all. So to come out of this, as per the experts in the logistics industry, it may take at least another 2 years because of the ships, which is a layoff they took, and also the containers. So the containers, 11% they used to manufacture in 2019. Already in 2019, only new container manufacturing was down. But again, in 2020, only we are able to manufacture 5% compared to the earlier. So these all affected a lot to this globally. And of course, it is a link. Logistics is a backbone of all the industries. So the link has got a lot of delays and effects to our economic growth for our India and globally, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. You nicely point out how far this condition in global area is happening. Very nice to hear, especially the Panama Canal, then the ship from Gujarat to Colombo, then how far the China effect. You nicely point out the China effect. So technically speaking, these are the reasons we must understand how far it is going to create. Let us come to the another issue like China, our neighboring country, Sri Lanka. You can see that Sri Lanka is happening with the unprecedented economic turmoil since its independence from Britain in 1948. We don't know what happened here, but the economists mentioned that the crisis is caused in part of lack of foreign currency, which has meant that country can't afford to pay for imports of foods, fuel. They used to mention that it could be due to exceeding of national expenditure compared to the income. So what went wrong in Sri Lanka, whether the same issue may reflect in other countries, whether it is due to this pandemic or any other issue. One faculty, Dr. Ketan from Kosh's group of institution is here. Sir, this question is for you. You can introduce yourself, and we are expecting more from the Sri Lankan crisis from you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity. So morning when you call, there is some kind of network issue where I couldn't able to join. So this is Dr. Ketan from Koshish. So I have done my PhD, so more than around 10 years of experience. So I'm an ICSSR fellow. So now I've been pursuing some postdoctoral fellowship from ICSS. So with this small introduction, so I'll be letting into the topic. So where I had seen many of the people that had given the issues regarding the crisis, where Shobha Madam has given regarding this logistics, how it has been affecting, and Dhananjay sir, they had given their views. So the topic which they had given to me toward the Sri Lankan issue, when Sir has told, Baba sir has told that they couldn't able to pay the money, they couldn't able to pay the money for the shipments also. Not only that, we can see the lights out, right? Surgeries was cancelled, fuel was unavailable. So the reality, that is what the reality of the Sri Lanka present. And the surprising thing, it was one of the worst crises, where they had been quoting up by many of the economists. It is when you take up 70 years of economy, so they are telling it one of the worst crises. Apart from that, one of the surprising thing where we started thinking, the people, they couldn't able to purchase a tablet to get rid of their headache, to see about what are the conditions that has been going up. So here, when all these things have been considering, so I used to tell there is a kind of domino effect, right? The domino effect is a thing which has created the most of ruckus in Sri Lanka. So what it has been happened is, in the 2019, the decision which was taken by the government, right, has created so much of the problem. It may be related to the taxes which they had been introduced, and what the taxes which has been introduced by the government, there is no any logic behind why they had been introduced. And the people also couldn't able to understand what the tax and why they had been paying up. The theme behind that is just to boost the Sri Lanka's economy, but they couldn't able to find out the loop why it has happened, right? And also immediately when they started rectifying, the COVID came, and the majority, so it also has created so much of problem, where around 10% of the GDP of Sri Lanka depends upon this tourism. The pandemic also has created. Forex reserve has been came down. In the 2019, it has been from 7.5 billions and to 1.93 billion. The comparison, Indian foreign reserves is only around 632.7 billions. So, however, they started demanding of the foreign reserves and all, but they couldn't able to draft it out. And when come in November, the inflation rate has been increased from 11.1% to 18.7%. The right now, the present inflation in Sri Lanka is 18.7%. And and one of the things where I used to tell is organic, where they had introduced organic to stop the chemical fertilization. It is also has created so much of problem. Rubber plantation, right? There are so many things where you can take it up. Price crisis has been happening. Here I will tell you small options where the Sri Lankan, they can try to draft out. The option one, they can capitalize their loan amounts. So where the Sri Lankan government can capitalize the loan amount, it means they can try to, they can set to give around 1 billion as a payments to lend off or to pay off this loan worth around 10 billions, right? The principal amount they can try to waive off. And second option is, taking repayments in Sri Lankan rupees, right? If creditors don't want to accept their option, there is a third one available. You can see where the Sri Lankan are trying to negotiate a loan from International Monetary Fund, IMF. They can try to negotiate, they can try to waive off. And IMF job, you already aware that it's they will try to help to function smoothly with the different countries. And though there are many options, but these are the main options where the Sri Lankan government can try to overcome the debts. They can try to function smoothly. And the main thing is that they must have to waive off the amount, the loan amount which they are been depending on, right? So they must start to negotiate with this IMF funds, and they can try to make sure they can easily, smoothly run their thing. And here, the interest what they have been paying up is more. The principal amount what they have taken and the interest what they have been paying up is very high. There is no any generation of revenue because the tourism has been down, right? So that is what, sir. Over to you, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Ketan, sir. You nicely pointed out the different political issues and different technical factors what leads to Sri Lankan crisis. And thank you, Ketan, sir. And let us move on to the second part about the Indian situation, from global situation to Indian situation. You can see in India, recently, the Reserve Bank of India suddenly announced the increase in the interest rate. You can see just 2 days back, suddenly the Reserve Bank of India governor announced that now the rate is going to be increased and repo rate is going to be now 4.4%, and the deposit facility, that is SDF, has been adjusted to 4.15%. Of course, the bank rate is moving towards 4.65%. Maybe is it the measure to cut down the inflation, or whether the RBI clearly predicted something is going to happen? That may be the reason why the repo rates are suddenly increased. I wish to ask this question to our panel member, Dhananjay Sirao from the JM Financial. Sir, what is your opinion about that one? The interest rate has been suddenly volatile and RBI also increased suddenly. What is your opinion? Whether we are facing any crisis or technical problems?
So there are multiple facets to it. I think there are, and you can actually segregate them in terms of what is more important and what is less important. There are multiple reasons why rates are supposed to go up. So if you look at the risk-free rate or market determined rates, those are already rising. So as I said earlier, 10-year government bond yields have gone up from 5.80% to almost like 7.5% now, and it has been rising across the board. Actually, what is happening is that you have a certain recovery. So one is the banking angle. So one is that there is a certain increase in lending growth that is happening. So from 5.8% growth, you're now about 8.5%. Whereas what is happening is that your deposit growth has actually come down. So incrementally, the deposits are actually decelerating. So as a result of that, there is a tightness in the money market that is happening because of that. So yields have risen. Secondly, I would say, of course, the inflation is a very important thing, and RBI had been lagging in terms of identifying the momentum of inflation, and hence they had to really adjust. So if you look at the fixed deposit rates, post the pandemic, the RBI reduced rates and infused a lot of liquidity of roughly about 11 lakh crores of liquidity through various TLTRO measures or other facilities that were given to banks and companies to ensure that solvency problems did not arise or insolvency problem did not arise. So that has translated into the deposit rates coming down to as low as 4% or something, and your inflation is well above that. So if you are at 7% inflation, you're getting negative return on your fixed deposit. That's a distortion. So that is another reason why you have to really adjust. I think most important thing is, according to me, is that RBI is seeing a considerable amount of pressure on the external balances front. We all know that because of the rising crude prices, and your current account deficit is actually rising to almost like 2.5% of the GDP. It was momentarily in surplus when crude oil fell, but today you are doing something like $20 billion of deficit in trade account every month. And that is translating into a sort of a 2.5% current account deficit. And because of the expected tightening in the global rates and by Fed, US Fed and other banks, you've already seen there is a drain of FX flows. So if you look at the foreign investors, they have withdrawn roughly about $22 billion over the last 12 months or so. And when the Fed continues to raise rates in response to their inflation, they withdraw liquidity. As I said, it had gone up to $9 trillion. It's expected to come down by roughly about $95 billion each month after 3 months. And the next 3 months it will be about $45 billion. So all that will translate into bigger pressure on the RBI. So your reserves of RBI has fallen by $42 billion from the peak we saw in I would say October, which was about $642 billion. So we are about $600 billion. Now, what happens as a result is that you are sort of defending your currency, but if the flows do not match up and your current account deficit continues, then you will have the run on a currency. So that's what RBI is worried about. And if you draw down your reserve much more, there can be currency attack. There can be fear. There is a fear of of capital outflow. And hence what you saw this week is that RBI announced rate hike suddenly ahead of the Fed's announcement in the evening, in the night. So they announced a 40 basis point increase in the repo rate, and they have increased the CRR by 50 basis point, draining out about 85,000 crores of liquidity. Now, so the thing is that there is a series of rate hikes that will happen. And the fact that they did it before the Fed's announcement of a 50 basis point hike tells us that if the spread actually narrows between US yields and Indian yields, the rupee can actually come under tremendous pressure. So RBI is guided by the fact that you have a tightening global financial situation, rates are rising, outflows are happening, there is a drain on capital, and there is a drain on FX reserve, which RBI will need to contend against. And as a result of that, you will need to increase rates to ensure that your capital flows, drain out of capital doesn't happen, and your rupee is supported. So it's a very complicated scenario for the RBI. It is managing not just the fact that you have current rates, which is your inflation, which is high, there is a distortion in the real rate, which is negative, steeply negative, and you have a currency which can actually depreciate quite sharply. So I think it's a very unenviable task that the RBI is actually faced with. And my sense is that as the Fed continue to raise rates, so I think the general expectation now is that there will be at least a 300 basis point increase in the Fed rate. Their inflation, the core inflation that they target is about 6%. Now you have to bring it down to 2%. And the real rate at this juncture, let's say it is about 0.75 minus, let's say 6%, you are a negative of 5.5%, which is lowest in last, I would say, 80 years. So what is going to happen is that there will be accelerated pace of tightening in US, in Bank of England, in ECB and other countries, and India will also sort of tag along. And the fact that there will be drain on capital and you have a current account deficit, your public debt to GDP is at 92% of the, which is almost like a highest level we have ever seen, that you will actually need to sort of tag along with whatever is happening, ensuring that the sustenance of the sustenance of capital outflow that's been happening can be stopped. So I think it's going to be a very tricky scenario, especially when your growth is going to come down. So I think this is a very complicated scenario for RBI. So I think the rate decisions, etc., are coming from a very complicated set of structure that the RBI is facing. So its objective is to ensure that the spillover effect of that on financial conditions don't happen. So I think the bigger issue is that if you look at the GDP level in December quarter and look at that on a compounded basis from pre-COVID level, which is like December quarter 2019, it's only a 3% average growth on a 2-year CAGR basis. So you are much lower in terms of growth, and you have a possibility of drain of capital. So I think this is a very complicated scenario that we are faced with. So we'll see. Today I saw one news clipping which basically says that in ET it has come, which basically says that some senior officials been quoted, which basically says that RBI would want to contain or maintain FX reserve at $600 billion. So you are already at $6 billion. So if you have continued outflow, if you have current account deficit, then you don't intervene, which means rupee can depreciate quite sharply. So I think they have been managing currency. It can be very volatile going forward. That's my answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Sinha, sir. Nicely you point out the indirect pressure to Reserve Bank of India to increase the rate. We understood that concept. What are all the different issues? Maybe something uncontrollable, and that may be the reason how it is done. Coming to the next internal factors that we are facing, the pandemic dramatically increased the borrowings of both private and public. According to one of the report created by the Institute of International Finance, they mentioned that the global debt is increasing highly. They are facing the debt, and companies, they are borrowing more debt and they are unable to repay. Maybe like 2008, the same problem created the financial crisis. Thinking about this deglobalization,
Yes.
Yes. How far this is having its effect in, especially in logistic industries, uh, because these companies are not ready to pay immediately. The receivables management they are doing in a different sense. They are unable to match with payables and receivables. That is why there is a delayed payments are happening because of the increase in the debt. Madam Shobha is in that field because how far you are facing the real problem because of the debt increase, whether your customers are able to pay immediately or your suppliers are facing this type of debt problem, how far the receivables and payables management is going on, whether it leads to crisis. Madam, over to you.
Yes, thank you, sir. Sir, yes, as we all know, debt. Without debt, no country or no house or anything. It is how there is in the debt, good debt and bad debt, both are there. So we have to manage what for we are getting the debt, how we are managing that debt. If for day-to-day activity without working, we are doing a debt management, then that loan we cannot repay back. So the thing, whatever we are getting the loan and for some asset, and we are getting the money out of that and we are doing it, that is a good debt. How we manage in a proper way that cash flow and debt both are the two coins of the any industry. So coming to this logistics industry, that debt, as you told, yes, earlier days 30 days credit was there, now it is gone to 60 days credit. Yes, the 60 days credit is going to 90 days. How it is going? Because invoice raised by the companies to reach them, and again to they tell that time the material has got delayed, so now we are not able to pay complete money, we will deduct. So of course there is a loss. So as we already know, the freight is very high. When the middleman or like a international movement freight forwarders to quote the rate for the customer to movement, he is not able to quote that keeping the hike, but still he has to give the credit paid. Giving that credit paid, he has to calculate and give. Yeah, some customers are there, they've understood the situation, and they're, of course, they are also earning and they're paying it back in time. But we many have got fear that if we do this, open up the finance to the paying and rotating, they're all keeping stuck, means they're not able to open up freely the money, where they're finding it difficult to spend the money on anything. And also the payments, the receivables is a huge spending in this logistics industry, and recovering that is again the main issues, the follow-ups, for recovering itself, whatever the freight rate we bought it, more than that sometimes is happening most of the time. Not only in the pandemic situation, compared to earlier also, few bad payers are there. They have the habit of that, and this given as a lot of what to tell reasons to tell them no, because of pandemic it is a delayed and we will pay it later. Now the money crunches are there, all this. So a lot of issues is happening. Causes are all behind. We all, as we already know. So delay in receiving payments is affecting a lot in the logistics industry, and cutthroat margin. See, if you see in India now, the freight forwarders, they call it as international movement people, are become very more and more companies are there. If I have one customer, I'll start my own company. If others have two customers, if some people are partners, by the time 1 year they divide into. So how they are managing, because even I give 30 days credit, others will give 60 days credit. It's very cutthroat business is happening compared to the earlier days. And to sustain, yes, it is really smart way of working, how to collect it. See, you are quoting the same, or how you are giving your rates compared to that, and how you are collecting, receiving in time, you will be sustaining. This is giving a lot of pressure on the employees also to get the market volume based to the sales to the companies, and to collect the money. Getting the what is that marketing target, reaching the target is easy. Collecting the money is the very good big question mark. It has become within 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It goes up to 100, more than 100, 150 years together is happening. So this takes some time to come and adjust and get into the streamline. So debt management, we should be very advisory before giving to the getting the business. We should look into certain factors of that particular company, how good they are financially, how they are rotating. Yes, the 1 day, 2 day is adjustable, not months together or years together. Or whatever your margin will go waste of that, and whatever your work, you will be doubled. Under loss, you will go instead of making the gain. So when you are doing a business, of course, to earn the revenue, to make the bread and butter for that and their employees. If you are lost, then the company will go under loss. There are many companies whose there lot of, not only in India, the global, this is the international movement happens. There is an association called the World Cargo Alliance is there, where WCA networking, they call it. They will be depositing there. They're also the members. They're also a lot of issues are happening because the agents are not transferring the money to the whoever the shipping companies where their movements happened. Not only the manufacturers, the middlemen, the movement, here also a lot of risk recoveries are there. This will take certainly not because of only pandemic, because of many other reasons also are there. So recovery is very bad in this situation compared to earlier.
So working capital, essentially you're saying must be rising quite a bit, isn't it?
Pardon me, sir, I didn't get it.
The working capital?
Yeah.
So the working capital must be skyrocketing, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Working capital, the rotation, revenue rotations
Yes.
are not happening. See, shipping lines are not giving any credit. The middleman will be giving more credit to attract the business. See, especially Indians have a fear that I will lose the customer. Whatever customer demand, we will be ready to give that much of credit period for them. If 60 days, the customers are rare, they will pay it in 60 days. So for 60 days only, I will calculate, I'll keep my margin and I'll sell it to him. But he will not pay in 60 days. So then that is going on.
So you have a combination of a very competitive business and an elongated working capital. That's what you're saying.
Yes, sir. Yes, you are right. You are right, sir. That is true.
Yes.
Capital.
So we need more working capital, but getting working capital is also very tough. You can say this is another financial risk what trading companies are now going to face.
Yes.
That reason. Thank you, madam. You nicely point out the reasons for all the global issues. Let us go to the next one. So I think now my question is to once again Dhananjay Sinha, sir. Sir, do you think that India will face any recession once again, or a short-term recession, or technical recession?
So the thing is, from India's standpoint, the government manages the data.
Yes.
So the thing is, rather than looking at a stylized classification of a certain phase of growth, we should look at what kind of growth is going to be there. So the thing is, if you look at the growth over a long period of time, so let's say we're talking about 1990s and thereafter, so we were at something like 6%, 5%, 6%, 7, 8, 9% also we have gone. And from 2012 onwards, we have actually been decelerating. So average structural growth has actually been coming down from 7%, 6%. Now, prior to the COVID, we were at 4% or 4.5%. Now, I would say that if I look at 2 years compounded growth, it is only somewhere around 3%, 2.9 something. Let's say it is 3%. If I look at all the forward projection, so my sense is that it is going to be closer to a structural growth is around 4%, based on whatever GDP number that we follow. That I don't have too much of faith in any which way. But what you do is to really look at multiple other indicators such as industrial production. Industrial production is now growing at 1.5% on a year-on-year basis. So I would say that you might actually see negative growth as well. You might actually see negative growth in the second half of this year. You might actually see or very, very modest growth. So we are looking at or whatever GDP number we have faith in, that will grow at something like a 3.5-4% in the last quarter of the year. So I'm saying that that will coincide with some much steeper slowdown in global growth, especially in advanced economies and all. China is already reeling under a sort of a major problem. Here, their manufacturing sector is actually into contraction now. The PMI for manufacturing is at about 40, 41, which means it is actually on the contraction side. And on GDP, they are about 4.5% thereabout. They have come down from, let's say, a decade back, they used to be almost like 10%. So clearly there is a sort of slowdown. And I would say that all the measures that people are taking with respect to rate hikes, tightening in monetary policy, to contain inflation, etc., and the fact that you will have a baggage of very large fiscal spending that you have done. So the delta from a government spending standpoint is going to be negative. In Indian context, if you look at it, government has budgeted only a 4.6% growth in the overall budget, and when the commodity prices were rise were not really factored in. So you have a fiscal deficit of roughly about 11.5 lakh crores. So I think government will be under pressure. Your monetary side is going to be under pressure. So it is. So the major concern I have is that the employment generation, especially for less skilled or even I would say educated youth, actually is not really responding enough. So CMI data tells us that the labor participation rate is falling because persistently there is lack of job and people have left the labor market. We have seen people have after the COVID and all gone back to the rural areas. They are there in the agriculture sector. The agriculture sector doesn't give you enough wages and it's no productive thing. So the problem is if you have a sort of a 4% kind of a thing or a 3% kind of thing, it doesn't create the job elasticity. So if you look at the overall economy, estimate shows that the employment elasticity in India case is about 0.2 for every sort of 100 basis point increase in real GDP. It only creates about 0.2 percentage point increase in the employment. So if you have a popular labor force which is growing naturally at something like a 1.5%, this is equivalent to the past population growth, then you require at least 5 times that in terms of growth, GDP growth, to absorb the incremental labor force that is getting added, and you have a backlog of what has happened after COVID or even before. So I think the major issue is you might see recession and all those things are all technical thing, whether you have a negative growth or not. But the problem is you have a prolonged period of very low growth, and you have which means that employment generation will be a major challenge. And you have very high inflation as well. So disposable income is not growing. So that is a serious policy issue, according to me.
Yes. Thank you, sir. And last one question to Dr. Ketan, sir. Sir, what do you think about the workforce? Because most of them have proved that after the COVID, the skill set of the labor has been reduced. So what is your opinion on the workforce of the upcoming employees, whether it will create any problem to economy? Dr. Ketan, sir, are you there?
Hello, is it audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You can quickly respond, sir. Sir, you can unmute yourself. We are unable to hear your sound. Your voice is not audible. Okay, I think some issues with him. Okay, let us move on to the final views. So nice discussion from the Dhananjay sir, Shobha madam, and even the Ketan sir. Nice to discuss with you. And based upon this discussion, I think we are not going to face a crisis like 2008 and 9. What Singhas are clearly told. This is going to be a slowdown. There's some technical issues. Maybe that reason. Of course, the Sri Lankan issue, Pakistan, Ukraine war, and the major global breakdown caused due to the global supply chain factor. We are going to face only the technical slowdown. Maybe it can be recouped by the new economic policy. Of course, we can see in case of the example of New Zealand, how it recoped immediately within the COVID situation. It's a very good example of that one. And in my view, by going through all this discussion, my opinion is that India has to reduce the rupee depreciation by adjusting the forex reserve or any other economical measure so that we can reduce the slowdown, but it is impossible to decrease the slowdown. That is my opinion. Thank you, panel members, all of you. Nice discussion. We will meet once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Sir, I would like to thank the panelists for providing knowledgeable insights on economic crisis and to overcome the crisis, and your expert advice to overcome the crisis and manage operations of business, households, and other sectors. Thank you, sir. It's good to hear from you all. Participants, if you're having any queries, you can post your queries in the chat box.
I think we can wind up.
Yeah.
That is closed.
Okay, sir. Now, I request Dr. Reshma Sultana, Assistant Professor, School of Commerce Studies, Jain deemed to be University, to propose vote of thanks.
Dear participants, requesting all to fill the feedback link and turn on your video for photo session. Please turn on your video for photo session. I deem it to be privileged to propose the vote of thanks and extend a heartfelt gratitude to one and all present here. On behalf of Faculty Research Cell Samshodhana, I would like to thank Dr. Dinesh Neelkant, Director, School of Commerce, for his continuous support and opportunities to be part of it. My sincere gratitude and appreciation to our guest of honors, Dr. B. Baba Nayana Kumar, Director of Consultancy and Corporate Training, Christu Jayanti College, Bangalore. Mr. Dhananjay Sinha, Managing Director and Chief Strategist, JM Financial Institution Security Limited, Mumbai. Mrs. Shobha Satish, Co-founder of Director Next Step Logistic Management Private Limited, Bangalore. Dr. Ketan, Faculty, Koshes Group of Institution, Karnataka. I extend my wholehearted thanks to the organizing committee, organizing secretaries, faculty coordinators, technical teams, research team members, faculty members, and participants from the different parts of India who have made this panel discussion successful. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Dear, the feedback link is put again. Please fill up the feedback link. Dear participants, again, reminding to fill up the feedback link.
We can go now, right?
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time. It was wonderful interacting with all of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vanilla and Dr. Sharmila.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Shima. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Padmavani, some